And what's the good thing is, in the next 2 weeks, the IPCC is going to be issuing their report on extreme weather and climate change. So when that comes out, there'll be a chance to, they'll publish something about that, so there'll be a chance to respond to that. But then also, as other weather events happen, you'll be able to say, like the IPCC said, now the question is, we know that's what's happening in the climate. What's the fastest way to deal with it? Put a fee on carbon, send all the money back to American households. Okay? All right, good. Yeah?
When we write a letter such as that, should we mention the Citizens Climate Lobby, or is it better to, in some respect, or is it better just to make it purely coming from Joe Blow?
You know, it's not bad at all to say that you're a Citizens Climate Lobby volunteer, because it kind of, you know, like organizations call it branding. Yeah. You know, anytime our name gets out there, it gets more momentum for us. And I think that we have something unique to offer to this right now, that anybody that comes to us helps move this forward as fast as anything else will. So it's good to associate yourself with us. Yeah?
I want to encourage people to write. I'm a fairly frequent local writer.
Yeah.
But the Lawrence Journal World limits you to one a month, 250 word maximum.
Yes.
And Ian Gardner has to be able to edit it.
Right. Right, that's the standard policy for most newspapers. It's usually 150 words for letters to the editor. It is usually one per month. Our group leader, Ellie in Richmond, Virginia, because she loves to write, and a lot of people in her group doesn't, she just sends them letters and they send them in. So she might get 5 or 6 letters per month. You can tell they're her. But so here's how it works in the paper. Letters to the editor make an impact. If you can get the paper to allow you to write an op-ed, we'll help you a lot with that, where the newspaper's publishing it as a editorial piece. But the big coup we're looking for is the paper to write their own letter, their own editorial, the internal position of the paper. That's where we spent the morning at the Kansas City Star, because in almost every case where we've gone and sit down with a paper, whether the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the LA Times, the Richmond Times, this is now the 25th paper, we've got editorials in most of those papers. Wow. And a significant increase in the amount of reporting on what's happening. So it makes sense to treat the papers in a partnership in the same way that you're treating the members of politics, okay? Okay. So, yeah.
So if we're wanting to write the letter and we mention Citizens Climate Lobby, is that something that we should go through some of the people that you said could help us write that? Did you prefer that, or how do we make sure we're staying on point?
First of all, let me say a couple things. One is, if you send the letter, which we'll give you Steve Volk's contact information, if you send it to him, it probably gives it a 90+% chance of getting published, because he knows what the newspapers are looking for. Okay? Now, in terms of having to be on CCL Message, we're a bottom-up organization. You know, you're part of Citizens Climate Lobby, but we're not going to dictate to you what you have to do. You're a part of this, and you're as much a part of the solution as we are. So if you want to say something, we're not going to say, no, you can't say that. So we want to help you say what we think is an effective message, but we're not going to tell you what you can or can't do. We don't think that's the way to solve it. We think we have to give people power to have their voice be as important as anybody else's. Okay? Yep. Okay. So I was having a call with the group in Richmond. It was the anticipation of this meeting. So we were talking about, okay, are we going to come to Richmond and do a chapter? And so we've been talking on the phone for an hour, and we're almost done, and somebody on the phone said, well, does the world really need another environmental group? Mm-hmm. I thought, wow, what a good question. I thought, who knows the answer to that question? I don't know the answer to that question. And so I don't know what kind of stumbling answer I gave them. But, sometimes people ask you something like that, and you kind of wander around a little bit saying, I wonder, I don't think we're an environmental organization, but if we're not, what are we? So then my daughter was just in the process of completing her master's degree in English, and she was studying a Uruguayan poet named Eduardo Galeano. And she brought home this poem that I think really gets at who we are. And first of all, she said, I want you to read what he said about his translator. She said, he said, Cedric Belfrage, let me just say one thing about this. My mother always told me that when people talk about other people, they tell you a little bit about the person being talked about. They tell you everything about the person who's doing the speaking. And that's always held up in my view. I think you learn a lot. By how people describe the world, it tells you about them, really. So he said, Cedric Belfrage died shortly after finishing his translation of my book, The Book of Embraces. We'd already worked together for many years. Each one of his translations increased our certitude of mutual identification. I would recognize myself in each of his translations, and he would feel betrayed and annoyed whenever I didn't write something the way he would have. A part of me died with him, a part of him lives with me. Then he writes the Spanish word recorder, to remember, from the Latin recordes, to pass back through the heart. How is it that the poets always know how to say something way better than you could? To pass back through the heart. Is there a better way of saying remembering someone than that? So here's his poem, Celebration of the Human Voice. Their hands were tied or handcuffed, yet their fingers danced, flew, drew words. The prisoners were hooded, but leaning back, they could see just a bit down below. Although it was forbidden to speak, they spoke with their hands. Pino Ungerfeld taught me the finger alphabet, which he had learned in prison without a teacher. Some of us had bad handwriting, he told me. Others were masters of calligraphy. The Uruguayan dictatorship wanted everyone to stand alone, everyone to be no one, in prisons and barracks, and throughout the country, communication was a crime. Some prisoners spent more than 10 years buried in solitary cells the size of coffins, hearing nothing but clanging bars or footsteps in the corridors. Fernandez Hudobro and Mauricio Rosenkopf, thus condemned, survived because they could talk to each other by tapping on the wall. In that way, they told of dreams and memories, fallings in and out of love. They discussed, embraced, fought. They shared beliefs, beauties, doubts, and guilts, and those questions that have no answer. When it is genuine, when it is born of the need to speak, no one can stop the human voice. When denied a mouth, it speaks with the hands or the eyes or the pores or anything at all. Because every single one of us has something to say to others, something that deserves to be celebrated or forgiven by others. I think that's who we are. I think Citizens Climate Lobby is simply an avenue for people to have their voice heard in the world. So what we invite you to is a group, a structure, an environment, a lot of practice, but mostly an avenue where coal and oil want to spend so much money that your voice is drowned out in Washington, D.C. We want to create an environment where your voice is heard as a powerful way as you can possibly make it heard. So, anyway, Lene, thank you so much for setting this up. We're so grateful that you would come spend a little bit of time with us. We think we do have something to offer to help you get done what you want to get done. And, thank you so much for coming here tonight. Appreciate it very much. Yep. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do we need to do anything to clean this room up or anything?
Well, two things. That being that, do people know then what the next step is?
The next step would be meeting at your house for the next call.
The first Saturday?
Yes.
And how, emails, do they get in your system or?
Yes, I'm going to make a roster and send it to you of the information. That'll go to you.